Good morning, Year 4. Our math lesson today we are focusing on dividing 1 and 2-digit numbers by 10. So our anchor task, what happens when we divide a number by 10? So have a look at our place value grid and think about when we're dividing by 10 what happens to our original number. Okay, so hopefully you've remembered that when we divide, our number gets smaller. And if we're dividing by 10, then the number is getting 10 times smaller. So using our place value grid, we would move all of our numbers one place to the right. So our 0 would move into our tenths column. And our 4 would move from our tens into our ones column. So the answer is 40 divided by 10 is 4. So what happens when we move through our place value grid? So we are moving to the right today because we are dividing. So thinking about what happens as we move through each column in our place value grid. Pause the video and have a little think. Okay, so when we move through each column of our grid, the numbers descend, so they get smaller, and they get smaller by 10 times each time. So what our hundreds are 10 times smaller than our tenths, which are 10 times smaller than our ones, which are 10 times smaller than our tens column. So when we are dividing by 10, which direction do the counters move? So we know that when we divide, our numbers get smaller. And because we've just discussed the value of each of our columns, we know that if we move to the right, our columns get smaller in size, they descend. So we know we're moving to the right. So here, I have the number 3 represented with counters. I have 1, 2, 3 counters in my ones column, and I want to divide this by 10. So I know they've got to move to the right, and I know that they are moving only one place because we are dividing by 10, and each column is 10 times smaller. So I'll move them over. So I can now see that I have no ones. I'll put my decimal point in, remembering that my decimal point never moves. The numbers move around it. The decimal point does not move. But I have 3 tenths. Why is my placeholder important? So my placeholder here in my ones column is to show that I have nothing left there. Okay, so this chart might help us as we are dividing by 10. Have a little look at it. What happens to the numbers as we move down the chart? So hopefully you've noticed that the numbers get 10 times smaller as we descend, as we move down the chart. So if we are dividing by 10, we can use this to help us because we can look at the number beneath to help us find the answer. So what numbers are beneath our counters? Thinking about our idea of dividing by 10, looking at the number above it, how could we work out what the numbers underneath the counters are? Okay, so we could have done 2 divided by 10, which would tell us this was 0.2. 5 divided by 10 is 0.5. And 9 divided by 10 is 0.9. It would have also helped you because this is very much like a number line counting in tenths, in decimal tenths, that if we had missing numbers, we could fill them in by looking at the numbers that are around it. So we would have known that 0.2 was between 0.1 and 0.3. So this could have been useful in many ways. So for bronze then, divide the number represented below by 10. So again, we have our place value grid, we have our ones and our tenths column. So the first question said, what number is represented? So I've got 1, to 3 in my ones column. So my number represented is 3. And how do we divide this number by 10? So we would move the counters one place to the right, because we know we're making the number smaller and we're making it smaller by 10. So I would move my counters over, remembering that the number moves, not the decimal point. So the answer would be 0.3. Because I have no ones, so I've got my placeholder, my decimal point, and 3/10. So at this point, if you would like to get on with your bronze questions, then you can. And then we can move on to our silver model and guided examples. Okay then, if you're moving on to silver, your questions will look something like this. What happens when we divide a 2-digit number by 10? So our number still moves one place to the right because we are still dividing by 10, and remembering that we want all of our counters, our numbers, to get 10 times smaller, so we need to move only one column. So our number at the minute that's represented is 21. Okay, and I am dividing this by 10. So I'm going to move my counters one place to the right. So my ones column move to my tenths, and my tens column move to my ones. So my answer is now 2.1, because I have 2 in my ones column, my decimal point, and 1 in my tenths column. A different style of question then, it says complete the calculation. So I have a gap in my number sentence, and I have a shape that's hiding my counters, so I'm not sure what my number is. So I need to use them both to help me. So here I can see that I have 3 ones, but in my number sentence I don't know what my ones column is. So already I can fill in the missing number in my number sentence because it's 23. Okay, now the counters show 3 ones, but I can't see my tens. So I can pop in my tens now because I know I have 2 of them, because my number sentence is helping me. Okay, so my number is now represented correctly, 23. 2 tens, 3 ones. So now I need to divide this number by 10. So I need to move my counters. Again, this number is getting 10 times smaller, so it will move one place to the right. So my ones will move to my tenths column, and my tens will move to my ones column. So 23 divided by 10, my answer is 2.3. Okay, if you are ready for your silver questions then, pause the video and have a go before we move on to gold. Our gold questions then are starting to look at the inverse. So if we have been looking at division today and dividing by 10, we're going to have some missing number problems. So you may do the inverse operation for division, but can you remember what the inverse of division is? Hopefully you've remembered that that is multiplication, so timesing a number. We are timesing by 10 with some of our questions for gold. So we've got something divided by 10 is 7.1. So we have a missing number. And then we know if we have a missing number, we do the inverse. So we're going to do 7.1 times, because we're using the inverse operation, by 10 equals. So this time we're making our number bigger, and you've actually been completing these questions in your arithmetic this week, so you should be a dab hand at them by now. So if we make our numbers 10 times bigger, we're now moving the numbers to the left of our place value grid. So 7.1 times 10 is 71. 1. So our missing number here would be 71. Another one then, we've got 0.2 equals something divided by 10. Now this looks more difficult, but it isn't actually any different. It's just we've turned the number sentence around and put the answer at the beginning. So we're still using the inverse to calculate the answer. So we'd still be doing 0.2 times by 10 to find our missing number. So we know that 0.2 times 10 is just 2, because we're making the 2/10 10 times bigger, so it would move to our ones column to make 2. So our missing number then in our original number sentence is 2. Okay, you are now ready for your gold questions then. So you can pause the video at this point, complete your gold questions independently, and then if you finish these and you want a real challenge, you can move on to your platinum questions independently.